thinking about all that that's taking place there, I mean, what developments can we expect to see around the charging now with all the developments in the battery technology and talk about these lighter, faster charging vehicles and things like that. And on the back of that, to just follow that up a little bit as well, in which will be the most important areas around this developments within the charging.
So a lot of people who've never driven an EV before will say, I want one that can charge in 5 minutes. But actually, once you've driven an EV, there's the question of how fast do you really need it to charge? And a good example of this is when you go to a service station. Today's modern EVs can charge within the average dwell time at a UK motorway service station. So about 25 minutes to get to about an 80% top up, maybe closer to 100. So when the Tesla Model 3 first came out, which can charge very quickly, the complaint was from EV drivers that it charged too quickly, because what you would do is you would plug in your electric vehicle when you arrived at the service station. You would then go into the service station for a whiz and a sandwich, and you come back out and your car would be almost ready to go, and you'd maybe sit in it for 5-10 minutes and then you'd unplug and away you go. Now, with the likes of the Model 3, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, and other fast charging EVs, you plug in, you go into the service station, you then get a notification on your phone saying, oh, car's nearly done. And by the way, if you don't move it off the charger, you're going to get an overstay penalty. You have to run outside with your burger in one hand and your phone in the other, and then unplug the car and then move it. So it's a very much a first world problem. But in both cases, if you were to have something that was like a 5-minute charging car, it'd be similar to what you would do with a petrol car in the same situation. So you would park, not plug in, go into the service station, spend nearly half an hour there, longer if you've got the family with you, then get everyone back in the car, then join the queue for the petrol station, stand there for 5 minutes filling it up, then go in and pay and then go again. So you've actually wasted more time having the supposedly faster charging vehicle. Also, the cost of enabling a 5-minute charge time is all well and good, the battery being able to do it, but the grid connection that would be required for each charger to do hundreds upon hundreds and hundreds of kilowatts. I mean, the most expensive chargers we've got today are probably the likes of the Ionity ones that do 350 kilowatts. There might be some, actually, there definitely are some slower chargers that have higher tariffs. But, in terms of like the fastest charging chargers we've got today, those would be the likes of Ionity, 350 kilowatts. That's not a cheap piece of equipment. You're looking at very high tens, maybe low hundreds of thousands of pounds per charger. Although the price is starting to come down. But that said, the grid connection is expensive. The capacity charge, as it's called, for basically having the grid able to support such a large load, that's something that doesn't apply to the likes of your house, by the way, because that's a very low load. But capacity charges apply when you've got a very big load that could come on suddenly and so on. Capacity charges are expensive, and that's why charging tariffs are expensive when you rapid charge. If you were to then enable a 5-minute charge, you'd be looking at double, treble the charger's power, which means double to treble at least the cost of the kit, the grid connection, the capacity charge. And of course, that tariff's all going to add up. And that means that you, as the driver, are going to have to pay silly money per kilowatt hour, all because you wanted to save a bit of time. Although, ironically, you've not saved time because you didn't charge it whilst you were in the service station because it would have charged too quickly. So it's that whole thing of the fastest charge is the one where it charged whilst you weren't staying with the car. And for the likes of your motorway rapid chargers, these high power charging hubs that are hundreds of kilowatts, that is perfect for service stations. And then your 7 kilowatt charge point you've got hopefully on the side of your house or near you or on your street where you live. That's perfect for overnight. I don't stand with my car whilst it's charging overnight. It does that whilst I sleep. But obviously, there'll be situations where a super duper 5-minute charge time does make sense for particular use cases. And that will happen. That will probably be for very specific use cases like taxis or something like that. But, even then, your taxi driver would charge whilst they're having their break, 20, 25 minutes maybe. And that's what taxi drivers do at the moment. But as I say, there will be those niche cases, but because of the expense, or rather because of the savings of doing things slightly slower, but still pretty fast, we'll probably stick with roughly that kind of charge speed. But that said, you will start to see megawatt scale chargers coming in for trucks. But that's because the truck's batteries, that's much bigger. They're not going to be charging those in 5 minutes. They're going to be charging them within the tackle break for the driver. So again, it's happening whilst the driver's away doing something else. And it's something that people who are used to petrol or diesel cars, they don't understand initially, but once they've driven an EV for a small amount of time, they, something switches in their head and they get it. You learn from experience, actually, yeah, this is actually quite convenient.
So it does sound then that the learnings that we're now starting to see, we don't necessarily need that really fast charge. And if you do want it, it comes at a cost, and it is the minority of places you can get it. But there's this happy medium in there that we're going to have to get used to as a charging infrastructure.
Yeah, and as I said, if customers nonetheless demand that they want a 5-minute charge time and they're prepared to pay for it, then you can absolutely bet the EV manufacturers and charging networks will roll that out. But genuinely, from the experience of EV drivers out there today, including myself, your sort of 20, 25-minute charge time is actually pretty decent. It's very practical. It means that you can go away, stretch your legs, grab a whiz and a sandwich, as I said. It's what we've done since 2010 when the first tranche of modern EVs came out. It's what we continue to do today. But the chargers are that much more powerful because the batteries are that much bigger. So, and even still, we've still seen a reduction in the charging time of a much bigger battery Tesla versus an original Nissan Leaf, which had a much smaller battery but much lower charging speed. So, it all kind of balances out. But as I say, the technology is there. It's just, and if it's not already there, it's coming very soon. But it's how practical it really needs to be, or how practical it is for for end users in reality. What I will say, however, is that battery swapping is seeing something of a resurgence in China. We tried it in Europe. It didn't really work out for a bunch of reasons, but I won't go into them just now. But China, where you've got a lot of high-rise apartment blocks, residential apartment blocks, there's not a huge amount of off-street parking. There's a ton, an absolute ton of rapid chargers in China. So, you can do that kind of 20, 25-minute top-up that I mentioned before. But there are some companies like NIO, for example, who have got battery swapping stations where you can actually physically take out the battery and replace it with a fully charged one in a matter of a handful of minutes. And some people really like that. But the other advantage of that is that the old battery that's been swapped out doesn't need to be charged in 5 minutes. It can go into like a big underground vat or whatever, where it's very slowly charged using a much cheaper grid supply, using a much cheaper electricity and so on. And also, it could potentially be doing grid support services whilst it's waiting on the next car. So it could discharge back to the grid if you are clever enough with your battery swapping operation. And that means you earn extra money from these assets, but it means you need more batteries because you need more than one battery per car, of course. You need to have enough to kind of swap in and out. But yeah, whether that will take off in the UK or not remains to be seen. There are experiments with battery swapping I'm pretty sure, Norway's got some swapping stations now. Pretty sure Germany does too. We will see if that actually gains any traction or if people go, well, actually, rather than have a monthly lease for the battery or anything like that, I'd much rather keep my existing battery and, disappear into a service station or a shop for about 20 minutes whilst my car's charging.